Sit back, relax, and take a virtual ride with me. You'll see interesting places you probably haven't seen. I hope you enjoy the ride and discover new places with me. Sit back, relax, and take a virtual ride with me.
Where's old Ben at today, you're asking? Well, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. And right behind me is the USS Cod, World War II submarine. And we're going to go take a look at that. Now, right down the road here, you look right over there. That glass over there that you see sticking up, pyramid tape, that's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, in the other direction of me, this way, we got the airport. And if I look this way, if you look back there behind me, that's Cleveland. Cod here sits right on the water. It's a little cold today. It's supposed to be 70 degrees, but we got a north wind coming right across the lake, so it's a little chilly. So I'm going to head in and I'll see you folks inside. Well, this is the USS Cod. It's a Gato class fleet submarine, 312 foot long, 1,525 ton, and she began her life July 21st, 1942, when her keel was laid at the Electric Boat Company, Groton, Connecticut. Cod was launched on March 21st, 1943, placed in commission June 21st, 1943. And there's a look at her, one of her propellers, one of the torpedoes. She had two kinds of torpedoes. They had a range of about 12 to 1,500 yards. Yeah, she had a couple guns on board, and they did a lot of damage. There was a 17 gun here. That's a Mark 40 25, 5-inch bore, 127 millimeter, range 13,000 meters. And she could shoot up to about 20 rounds per minute. That's pretty good. She also had a Bofors 40 millimeter anti-aircraft gun and two Browning machine guns, 12.7 millimeters. That can do a lot of damage, and later in the war, they used them a lot. Our submarine losses during the war were about 17% of the fleet. Compare that to Japan and Germany at 75% loss. This is the hatch. This is how you get in. Yeah, it's a straight up ladder from there. After you've already went up one ladder. A little tricky. Forward torpedo room. It's where they fired these two types of torpedoes. They had a lot of trouble to start the war with torpedoes. They just didn't work right. But it took them a while. It took them better than a year before they got it right. Now there's 6 torpedo tubes here up in the bow, and a lot of bunks. At what point a Dutch submarine had went aground. Out on parole, she ran across some coral and went aground, and the Cod was commissioned to go get her. Well, they found her, tried to free her. It took them 3 days to try to free her, and they couldn't do it. Both captains agreed they needed to abandon that ship, and they did. Took all the sailors, 55 of them, put them on the Cod with their crew, and they destroyed the Dutch submarine. Later, when they got back to Dutch Harbor, they had a big party, and during that party they found out World War II had ended. party lasted a long time. Well, we're going to go through this ship a little bit at a time here. And it's always amazing. Now, you have to know these sailors were well trained, but when they came aboard, they had to be trained some more. And they had to do a lot of studies, a lot of studying besides the training. And until they did, they had to share bunks. Once they had got their classification and their studies were done, they got a bunk of their own. This is a little mess hall here. They didn't really cook in here, but they served the officers from here. And this is where the officers ate. It's where they conducted their business. You can see where they served them through here. This is where they ate. This is where they took their meals. This is different on this submarine. You'll see that aluminum or metal pot hanging on the wall. That's a little sink. And this guy in the pajamas is interesting. The story was that was the captain of the ship. And he stayed in the conning tower. It was pretty hot, but he always wanted to stay next to the periscope. And one time when they spotted something and they were gonna dive, they went up there and he was nude. It was pretty hot. Well, that was kind of a shocker, but the crew went and bought him a pair of pajamas after that. Striped pajamas. And it got to be quite a story. More officer quarters. Compared to this last sub we were on, this is a little bit more luxury on this one. And these pictures are throughout the boat. These are pictures of actual time on the sub during World War II. More officers' quarters. It was on the Cod's third patrol that Captain Dempsey, on his last command, fought the biggest battle the Cod had ever fought. After tracking a massive Japanese convoy heading to the Subic Bay in the Philippines on the night of May 10th, 1944, Cod moved into firing position just after sunrise. She fired 3 of her 4 stern torpedoes at the Japanese destroyer Kakuhua before unloading all 6 of her bow tubes at 2 columns of cargo ships and troop transports. Everything hit home. She sunk the destroyer and 6 ships, and then ran for her life under heavy attack. Now you notice the red lights here. Interesting.
Familiar with the scene where the sub skipper is looking through the periscope when he suddenly yells out, "Enemy plane approaching fast! Down scope! Dive! Dive!" I'm Lieutenant Frank Kimball, Cod's diving officer, and this is the control room, the compartment that contains all the controls used to dive Cod, to maintain her depth under the sea, keep her level or trim, as we say, and when it's all clear, to come to the surface again. Basically, a submarine submerges by allowing seawater into ballast tanks outside the boat's pressure hull and creating a situation called negative buoyancy. Controlling the speed and amount of water coming into the tanks determines the speed of the dive. To surface, compressed air is blown into these tanks, driving out the seawater so that the boat will have the positive buoyancy needed to float. The levers that let in seawater for submerging are located port, or what we call the wet side. The valves that drive compressed air into the ballast tanks, forcing the water out and allowing us to surface, are on the starboard, or dry side. The Christmas tree, or indicator board, the black panel with red and green lights located forward on the port side bulkhead, clearly and quickly displays the status of all vents and hatches. A red light means a vent or hatch is still open. Green, that it is properly closed. A green board announcement from a crew member stationed at the Christmas tree means it is safe to submerge the boat. The large levers below the Christmas tree open ballast tank air vents, releasing the compressed air inside, which allows seawater to flood the tank. The large brass wheels you see on the port side control the diving planes. 2 sets of fins located on each end of the boat, which regulate the steepness of Cod's dives and allow her to change depth while submerged. The bubble indicators located on the bulkhead between the brass wheels show the angle of the dive and allow the plane operators to match that angle with the diving officer's orders. My planesmen are so skilled that Cod can be at periscope depth in less than 40 seconds. You will also notice the red lights in the control room. These are used throughout the boat at night when we're surfaced, so that the eyes of anyone going topside will already be adapted to the darkness. We call this rigged or red. The control room also contains a plotting table where Cod officers can utilize their jobs.
Well, we're entering now this guy's area. This is George Sacco. George was a cook. Actually, he was the baker on board. Interesting. He baked a lot of bread. A lot of bread. I think their baking pans at the time, 2, 4, 6, I think 6 loaves at a time, and they could put 12 in an oven at a time. You know, you're mixing yeast. You got to dry that bread, but let it cool. And how do you do that? Well, if you just set it out, it'll disappear. This is a bread locker. Has holes in the front of it and around it so air can circulate, so the mold doesn't grow as fast. And this is the galley, this is the part of the galley. This is service area, and you can see they have normally there are the pictures. This is how many they could serve at a time. Across the galley, you got your sink, dishes, and you'll see here in a minute this cabinet here with a hole in it at the top. It's got the hole in it and cut, and they put that's because he needed more room for bread to cool. So George cut that hole in that cabinet, put a screen over it. He could lock it up, and that's where the bread's set. He was quite a guy. Now this crew's quarters. Now there are 80 bunks on this boat, and most of them are right here. Now there's some sure in the forward torpedo room and some in the aft torpedo room. But most of them are right here. The young guys that came on board that hadn't qualified yet, they had to share one, and it was usually the one on the bottom. You didn't want to be on the bottom, because when they took on supplies, they had to find storage, and a lot of that storage was on the floor, and some of it on those bottom bunks, like sacks of flour or sugar. Not very comfortable. So you wanted to get qualified as fast as possible. You know, a submarine runs on the surface about 90% of the time. They're only underwater about 10%. A couple reasons for that. Sure, speed's one. And battery life is another. There's a shower, clean up area, and look at here. Washing machine. Yep. And laundry. A bag of laundry, of course. You'll see towels. Oh, there's one of the heads. Heads are interesting. I think I mentioned this on the other submarine. If you didn't do this right, you got a mess. A dangerous mess. It can actually flood a sub or maybe even sink it. But it's the mess that you got to worry about the most. Now, they had 2 different types of heads on this particular ship. I won't go into a lot of detail about the other one, but it was more of a normal flushing. It went into holding tanks. Here's the engine room. 4 diesel GE engines. And they'll give you about 6,400 horsepower. They're very, very loud. That water maker, they have water makers here too that can distill drinking water at about 1,000 gallons a day. Look where they hang some of their laundry. Sure, in a hot room, an engine room. And there's their skivvies. You think the sailors dressed all day long? Pretty hot, particularly in the Caribbean, down there in South American areas, in the South Pacific. Pretty darn hot, and you can bet they went around in skivvies a lot. And these engines are running, it's really, really loud. When they're underwater and they run on the electric batteries, it's very, very quiet. Also very slow underwater. You can do about 12 now, or 21 knots above water, and only 9 submerged. Not very fast. They have a range of about 11,000 miles, and that's if they're doing 10 knots. Takes about 75 days, and that's a range of about one of their mission cruises. The engine compartment will run about 120 degrees, so it does get a little warm. The boat is air conditioned, but mostly that is for the life of the electronics and the other operational gadgets on the boat. I still call her a boat sometimes, even though it is probably a ship. There's a lathe. And this is one of the electrical rooms. High voltage. That's a warning. What I didn't show you there in the galley is there are freezers. You wonder where they keep the meats and so forth. There are freezers below the galley. And there's a hatch that takes you down there. And it's a refrigerator and then a freezer. I also mentioned in one of my other videos, food in the submarine service was the best the Navy had. Why not? As I said, gotta know what you're doing. The aft torpedo room. 4 torpedo tubes back here. Breathing apparatus. Now they did have a little incident here where one of the torpedoes started to melt down one of the internal part of it, and I don't know what it was all called, but it started to melt down inside, and it gave off a very toxic, the batteries and so forth, very toxic fumes, and you couldn't see a thing in here, but they had to get it out. And so the first crew that tried didn't get it out, but they had to come out. They couldn't see, they couldn't breathe. Second tried to go in, and they couldn't get in. Finally, a group got in and managed to get the torpedo in the tube and get it fired. And as it turned out, just in time, because it then exploded outside the boat. That would have sunk her. It wasn't all roses. Now I will tell you that there are all kinds of, if you go to the USS Cod webpage and go on from there, you'll find tons and tons of videos that they have done. And this is the only way out, and the only way in is through hatches.
The torpedo room is generally cooler and more quiet here than the rest of the boat, making it a great place to sleep.
Now a guy was working up there, and I couldn't get out right away, so I turned these recording on, so he'd know I was down here, needed to come up. And I did have a little problem getting up. Camera bag kept getting stuck. But I made it, got up, same way I got down, crawled 2 different ladders straight down, no angles. This was a great tour. You see the martini glass? That's for that party they had with the Dutch. Well, time to head out. I'm going to go through the airport area here just to see what it looks like. Go past the Hall of Fame here. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame there on the right. And then head downtown. Love this downtown area. I wish it would take me a day to walk around this town. Next time, as they say. Yeah, sure. There's that monument. Civil War monument. Boy, what a monument. That's a dandy.
Well, sports fans, what'd you think? Now, I know we've been through a submarine before, but each time it's kind of interesting. This one was very interesting. The fact that there was no way for tourists to get down other than to fall through the hatches, just like the sailors had to. And carrying the camera bag, that got a little interesting. But old Ben managed to get through there, climb up that ladder. Actually, 2 ladders. What do you think of Cleveland? I know I didn't get to walk around Cleveland, which, boy, would have been entertaining too. That's an interesting city. Monuments and so forth, very interesting. But I ran out of time. I didn't get to do that. Sports fans, listen. Check out Ben's website. Ben's Hangups, all one word, .com. Check it out. Check out Ben's Facebook page, Ben's Hangups. And you too can see what will happen when somebody is being chased by the police and they don't want to stop. And what can happen to you as an innocent bystander. So anyway, on the road heading back. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything. Helps old Ben out. Hit that like button. Helps me out also. You know what? As always, old Ben will see you down the road.
I hope you enjoy the ride. Discover new places with me. Sit back, relax, and take a virtual ride with me. There's a beautiful country out there to see. Relax in your seat and turn on your TV. Sights and sounds will fill your video screen. Historic sites such as just scenery. Small town parks and festivities. No high price gas or anxiety. All of this from me to you I'll share. And you won't even have to leave your comfy armchair. You got the whole wide world to see. Great destinations and friendly people for seas, shining sea. I hope you enjoy the ride and discover new places with me. Come on back